Do you like mysteries? To wander through the enigmatic mist of the inexplicable? Great. I'm Merc, and here you'll find what you're looking for. Welcome to my domains. The truth dissolves into the mist.
Sir, somewhere in the interior of Panama, on an afternoon that seemed ordinary, the sky tore open with a roar unlike anything the local residents had ever heard before. A blinding light cut through the atmosphere, and within seconds, everything known as routine was replaced by a question that would echo through the darkest corners of the internet. What exactly had landed in Jose's backyard? The videos that began surfacing on social media were disturbing. They showed a dark, viscous mass, pulsing as if it had a life of its own, slowly growing over the dry earth, consuming the space around it. The shape resembled something from a nightmare, an amorphous creature spreading like a parasite, and the burnt smell emanating from the object was so intense that neighbors covered their faces with cloths. Have you ever stopped to think what you would do if a piece of the sky fell into your yard and started moving? No, I am not talking about a simple meteorite. I am talking about something that seemed alive, something that stretched out like an organism searching for a host, something the internet quickly baptized as the Venom Meteor. The story spread like fire through dry grass, and soon the most bizarre theories began to emerge. Some said it was an alien life form, an intelligence that had traveled millions of years to finally find a home on Earth. Others believed it was a military experiment that had gone terribly wrong, a biological weapon that had escaped control and now threatened to spread deep. The atmosphere around that backyard became an invisible battlefield where fear and curiosity clashed. People gathered at a safe distance, filming with their phones, while the object pulsed, growing and writhing as if in a state of agony or, perhaps, hunger. What no one knew at that moment was that the truth was stranger and, at the same time, more mundane than any science fiction could create. The object was not an organism, it was not a weapon, and it certainly was not a visitor from another world. But that did not make the story any less frightening. Science, with its cold and impersonal logic, began to dismantle the mystery piece by piece. And what remained was a revelation that made many laugh with relief, while others sighed in disappointment for having believed in something so fantastic. The dark mass spreading across the yard was, in fact, a silicon polymer known as PDMs, or polydimosilicon mixed with a solvent called hexane. But how could a simple chemical mixture create such a convincing illusion of life? The answer lies in the physical nature of these substances. When hexane, which is highly volatile, comes into contact with PDMs, it begins to evaporate rapidly, causing the polymer to expand in a way that mimics the growth of a living being. Imagine a balloon slowly inflating but with an irregular and dark surface, and you will have an idea of what the local residents witnessed. The burnt smell, which was one of the most disturbing details, was simply the result of rapid oxidation of hexane as it dissipated into the air. The most accepted theory among specialists is that the object did not come from space, but from somewhere much closer, perhaps from a laboratory or from a container of chemicals that had been improperly discarded. Someone, somewhere, had likely lost a shipment of industrial materials that, by chance, landed exactly in the wrong backyard. The internet, which had fed on the mystery for days, quickly lost interest when the scientific explanation was released. But what remains is the feeling that, for a brief moment, the world believed that the impossible was possible, that the sky had sent us something that defied human understanding. And that feeling, my dear viewers, is more valuable than any scientific truth. Because, deep down, we all want to believe that there is something more out there, something that transcends our understanding, something that makes us feel small in the face of infinity. But what if the Venom Meteor was not a mistake or an accident? What if someone, intentionally, had placed that expanding mass in Hosa's yard? The questions now begin to arise in a completely different direction. Gibbs. The Venom Meteor case quickly caught the attention of local authorities, who isolated the area and began investigating the origin of the object. What they found was even more disturbing than the substance itself: traces of a manipulation that seemed to have a purpose. Initial reports indicated that PDMs mixed with hexane was not a compound that occurs naturally. It was created in laboratories for specific purposes, such as manufacturing lubricants, sealants, and even cosmetic implants. But the amount found in the yard was far greater than any commercial use would justify. This led investigators to consider the possibility that someone had deliberately created that scene, perhaps as a social experiment, a test to see how people would react to an apparently supernatural phenomenon. And if that was the case, the experiment was a resounding success. Local media, always eager for a good story, began hunting for the person responsible for what they now called the meteorite hoax. But, much like the object itself, the culprit seemed to dissolve into thin air, leaving only traces of doubt and suspicion. Meanwhile, Jose, the owner of the yard, gave interviews that ranged from shocked to bewildered. He claimed he had no idea how the object had ended up there, that he woke up that morning and found that thing pulsing in his garden. His story, though convincing, did not explain how something so heavy and bulky could have fallen without damaging the structure of his house. Science, once again, came to the rescue of logic, suggesting that the object had not fallen from the sky, but had been placed there, perhaps during the night. The fact that the videos began circulating only after the object was already expanding suggested that someone had waited for the right moment to reveal the discovery. All of this leads us to an uncomfortable conclusion, that we were deceived, but in a way that made us want to believe. The digital age has turned all of us into potential victims of carefully constructed illusions, and the Venom Meteor is merely the latest example of this new reality. But, my dear viewers, the question that remains is, if this was a hoax, who benefited from it? Was it an artist wanting to make an impact, a scientist testing public credulity, or simply someone who wanted to watch the world burn, even if only a small part of it in Panama? The narrative of the Venom Meteor, which began as a digital frenzy, now unfolded as a mystery worthy of the best suspense screenplays. Each new piece of information seemed to add layers to an enigma that challenged the very nature of truth in the information age. What started as a viral phenomenon had now transformed into a reflection on what we are willing to accept as real. Experts in communication and psychology began analyzing the phenomenon, pointing to a pattern that had already manifested itself before, when a story gains traction not because of its veracity, but because of its ability to fill an emotional void. We, as a society, are starving for wonders, and the Venom Meteor served as a feast for that hunger. Jose's yard became a pilgrimage site for curious onlookers and conspiracy theorists. Some brought instruments to measure radiation, others prayed, and there were those who simply wanted to see with their own eyes the place where the impossible had almost become reality. Speculation about the object's origin gave way to a cottage industry of merchandise, with T-shirts and mugs printed with the image of the dark mass. But while pop culture embraced the phenomenon, scientists continued their meticulous work. More detailed chemical analyses revealed that the PDMs and hexane mixture contained traces of a catalyst that accelerated expansion, suggesting that the object had been prepared in advance and was not a simple industrial discard. This led to a new theory, that the Venom Meteor could be a form of artistic protest, a critique of our society hypnotized by screens and the constant need for viral validation. The artist, if one existed, would have created an ephemeral work that captured the world's imagination for a few days, only to be unmasked by the very science it challenged. But what happens when the truth finally comes to light? The media, which had previously fueled the hysteria, quickly shifted its tone, turning the mystery into a lesson about the dangers of misinformation. The discourse changed from "what if it's real" to "how were we deceived?" And in that transition, the story lost its shine. However, the impact of the Venom Meteor cannot be underestimated. It served as a stress test for our collective ability to discern fact from fiction, and the results were, to say the least, concerning. The speed with which the story spread and the ease with which it was accepted revealed a vulnerability that can be exploited by those with less benign intentions. And it is precisely at this point that the Venom Meteor script turns dark. If someone can create such a convincing illusion with simple chemicals and a well-crafted narrative, what prevents something similar from being used for more nefarious purposes? The line between entertainment and manipulation is thinner than we would like to admit. Science, which unraveled the mystery, also left us with an uncomfortable question. What if the next time there is no scientific explanation? What if the object that falls into someone's yard really is from another world, and we, trained to doubt by stories like this, simply ignore it until it is too late? The Panama case teaches us that, in a world where anyone can create an alternative truth, curiosity and skepticism must go hand in hand. We cannot afford to blindly believe everything we see on the screen. But we also cannot dismiss the possibility that the extraordinary may one day become real. Meanwhile, Jose's yard returned to its routine of silence and dust. The PDM's mass was removed by specialized teams, and the site was cleaned as if nothing had happened. But for those who witnessed the event, or who followed it through their screens, the memory remains. A reminder that reality is more malleable than we imagine. What remains, in the end, is the feeling that the Venom Meteor was a mirror, a reflection of our own hopes and fears projected onto a mass of silicone. It showed us that we are ready to believe in the impossible, but that we are still very unprepared to deal with the truth, whatever it may be. And you, viewer, what would you do if something strange fell into your yard? Would you pick up your phone to film or call the authorities? Or, perhaps, you would sit in silence, watching the unknown take shape before your eyes, waiting to see which story the world would choose to tell. The Venom Meteor may have been unmasked, but the legacy of its brief existence is a reminder that the marvelous and the terrible are always just one story away. And, as long as there are skies and backyards, there will always be the possibility that the next roar is not just a chemical accident, but the beginning of something that will forever change the way we see the universe.
Did you like this mystery? And what is your theory? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed it, then like and share. I'm Merc, and I'll be waiting for you in the next mystery.